It's 5:30, so I'd like to call this meeting to order. Stephanie, can we please get roll call?
Of course. Chair Penny Owens,
Present.
Committee Member Lee Heller,
Present.
Committee Member Lori Gaskin,
Present.
Committee Member Stephanie Moray,
Present.
Committee Member Todd Rulon Miller,
Present.
Committee Member Ann Burdett,
Present.
Committee Member Chris Klein. Absent. Thank you.
Next on our agenda is approval of our minutes from the February 19th meeting.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Abstain?
I abstain since I was not present.
Carries. Thank you. And Ms. Markey, are there any agenda adjustments this evening?
There are no agenda adjustments this evening.
Thanks so much. And we're moving on to public comment. And I just want to remind any folks listening in to this meeting online or watching it at a later time that one of the agenda items last month was the creeks buffer ordinance. And the city will be collecting public comment until close of business on Monday, and I believe that is the 25th. March 24th, close of business at 5 p.m. So you have that till then to provide any comments in writing. And again, just remind folks that there's a ton of great resources on the city's website and a lot of information and frequently asked questions as well. And I have one speaker slip in person here, so we'll start with you, Joseph, if you'd like to approach the podium.
Hello, I'm Dr. Joseph Frawley.
Turn your-
Oh, can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yes, thank
Can
you.
the people out in the world hear me?
That's who we're concerned about.
Okay,
Thanks.
all right. Yeah, I lived by a creek for 40 years here in Santa Barbara. I came by and looked at the presentation that was about a month ago, looking at the various diagrams. And to me, it seems like a well-intentioned ordinance, but I think it's got a lot of practical problems. One, and I've sent some people here an email about this. I don't know if who's gotten it or whatever, but I replaced my roof about 2 years ago, and this ordinance would have had to make me redesign my whole house, which would have been hundreds of thousands of dollars to do that. So that would be a concern. Second, all the creeks are very variable, as you've shown in your diagrams. I think that makes a one-size-fit-all very unfair and impractical. I think it's really a problem when you've got people whose house, my house, 30 feet of my house is within this ordinance place. So it would be very impractical for me to do this. I think it'd be very hard for someone to purchase my house. It's oriented as east-west orientation, so it gets nice southern sun coming in. To do this ordinance, I'd have to have a north-south ordinance orientation, which would make the sunlight totally different in my house, really affect the value of the house. I know the Creek Committee has purchased property to create a better environment, but you're not going to purchase this land. It's impractical to do that. So it really amounts to uncompensated loss of land. So anyway, those are my comments. I'm concerned about the ordinance. I think it could have negatively affect. I'm not sure what the alternative should be, but I think the way it's written is not good. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for your comments.
Chair Owens, I do have a speaker online.
Just going to ask you. Thanks so much, Stephanie.
I'm going to go ahead and unmute them. So Crystal Barrows, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Good afternoon. Thank you for convening. I'm not sure. This was a last minute heads up for me, so I apologize if I'm not in keeping with the theme here, but are we talking about the creek buffer ordinance draft?
This is general public comment, so you can provide comments for the draft creek buffer ordinance at this time.
Okay, great. So Thankfully, Melissa Hetrick was out here and speaking to us. I live at the Flamingo Mobile Home Park, and we have a really unique situation here. We're over on the Lower East Side, sitting on Sycamore Creek. The creek actually divides our little mobile home park into two sections. I would say halves, but it's more like 1/4 and 3/4. And it runs right through the middle of our little old trailer park. Fortunately, she said that Dan Henschke is going to be looking at how HCD and the mobile home residency law might impact our peculiar circumstances, because if any one of the mobile homes that sit basically on the creek would have to follow this ordinance, 50 feet would put us literally in the street. It's a physical logistic impossibility in our circumstance. So I just wanted to give you folks a heads up on that in case you weren't already apprised of that. Additionally, I'm gonna, what do I have, 3 minutes, 2 minutes? We have another peculiar circumstance, which is at the end of our trailer park, where is Hootash Street, and that's where the Hootash Culvert is. And it takes the Sycamore Creek and restricts it greatly to go through a little tube, as it were, to get, we're close to the bird refuge, so to get to that section. We have been pleading for more than a decade to get that fixed properly, so it doesn't have to be so narrowly constricted. However, the work that's going on downstream, closer to the freeway, they've been telling us has to be done first, and that keeps running into budget nightmares and non-completion. So every year when it rains, the Hootash Culvert plugs and floods our little trailer park. And we are seniors and we're low income. And last year, for example, we had a mandatory evacuation. Some people ignored it. I didn't. I evacuated. But if you guys could look at the Hootash Culvert again, I would like that. And thank you for continuing to work on this creek buffer ordinance. Hopefully there'll be some extenuating circumstances for our particular situation. Thank you.
Thanks for calling in and for your comments. I believe we had one more person join us here. We're in public comment right now. If you'd like to speak, just listening. All right, great. Yep, no problem. All right, so last minute, I don't think we have any other public comments online or otherwise. Excellent. We'll move on to committee member and staff communications. Erin, any communications or updates?
I have no specific updates other than our April meeting, regularly scheduled meeting will likely be canceled, and we'll be having a special meeting for the budget subcommittee, just as an FYI to everyone. Yeah.
Great, thank you for that. And moving on to business items. Our first item, 7A, is a stormwater management program report provided by Jim Rumbley. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you. I'll start off by giving some background information about the stormwater management program. Then we'll go into the components that make up our program. And then at the end, there'll be an opportunity for any questions that come up. So you might have heard our stormwater management program referred to as the SWIMP. This is what a lot of city employees and many applicants refer to our program as. But essentially, following the SWIMP policies and rules detailed in our city's general permit is what allows the city to discharge stormwater to the creeks and ocean. The city's Creeks Division provides overall coordination of the permit, but it's the responsibility of all city staff to make sure they're in compliance. There's about 200 plus measurable goals that we have to report on each year, and we'll talk more about the annual report that we have to submit in a little bit. There's 6 primary components of the stormwater management program that we'll talk about: construction runoff control, illicit discharge detection and elimination, outreach, post-construction, water quality monitoring, and trash capture. First, construction runoff control. That's primarily the purview of the city's Building and Safety Division. And it involves construction projects needing erosion and sediment control plans before they can have an issued building permit. So depending on how much grading is proposed, you might need a simple plan or a more extensive plan. But these plans just identify where erosion and sediment controls will be installed on site. Last fiscal year, our building inspectors went to 923 different sites to perform inspections to make sure that these measures were installed properly. City's also required to keep inspection records and a running inventory of all construction projects that have these erosion and sediment control plans. Just thought we'd go over a couple of different types of, measures to control sediment on site. This is a handout that applicants can download on the city's webpage if they have a building permit. So you might see some things like sandbags around storm drains to prevent sediment from flowing in, covering materials on site, covering dumpsters to make sure that there's no migration of sediment off site, and then perimeter controls like straw wattles and sandbags to control sediment, and such things as an area where you'd do a washout for a concrete truck after it's finished pumping. The next component of our program is illicit discharge detection and elimination. The city has 3 dedicated code enforcement officers that are available to respond to any illicit discharge reports that come in. And the requirement is that once we receive one of these reports, we respond within 24 business hours. Staff also train the city field staff each year to make sure they know what an illicit discharge is and how to prevent that in the course of what they do out in the field. Last fiscal year, we had 105 illicit discharge reports, and all of those were responded to within 24 business hours. We also have the ability to remove trash from the city's creeks and beaches. So, there's illicit discharges, but there's also cleaning up these illicit discharges. So when staff find trash on the creek or on the beach, we have a contractor that can come out immediately and clean up whatever they find. So last fiscal year, and in most years, we clean up around 100,000 pounds of trash. That's just on average what we find. The next component of our program is outreach. We have several dedicated outreach coordinators within our department that implement education and outreach related to improving creek and ocean water quality. This includes giving presentations in schools, coordinating volunteer opportunities like beach and creek cleanups. It also includes hosting Creek Week events every year that include restoration site tours and events at the creek. This includes the very popular Land Shark tour every year. If you haven't gone on that, I encourage you all to give that a try. We're also continuing to promote the TikTok-inspired We're All the Solution to Water Pollution. They're continuing to run ads. I see them pretty frequently. And when I hear the song, it gets stuck in my head. So there's a couple new items that our outreach folks are focusing on. We have promotion of the new stormwater rebate program, which Aaron Markey is going to talk about next. We also have an urban creek trails program that launched during Creek Week last year. And this is just a self-guided tour of Lower Mission Creek and the lagoon, where you can go online and check it out, even from your phone, and it'll have just things of interest. So like native plants and trees, several spots where you can see how stormwater is captured and treated with permeable pavement and downspouts directed to landscaping, and also some creek restoration. The next component of our program is post-construction. So this is the component of our program that I spend most of my time working on. And, it's kind of jargony, but the way you can think of post-construction is the ongoing treatment of stormwater after construction projects are completed. So, when you build anything in the city, if you're proposing new or redeveloped impervious area, there's going to be some type of post-construction requirements. We have 4 tiers, and we have tiers 1 through 4. And just for example, a tier one project, is a pretty small project, and you can comply with a Tier 1 project by doing something as simply as taking a downspout from your roof and directing it to landscaping. Whereas on the other end of the spectrum, we have Tier 4 projects, and these are projects that propose at least 15,000 square feet of new and redeveloped impervious areas. So really, really big projects. And stormwater treatment for something like that would involve, for every square foot you're capturing, every square foot of new impervious area, you're capturing the 2.4-inch 24-hour storm and retaining it on site. So a big project that also is going to come with significant stormwater compliance. Some of the projects that you might be familiar with that will be either complying with Tier 3 or Tier 4, the new police station, De La Guerra Plaza, Paseo Nuevo redevelopment, the La Crumba Plaza redevelopment, the recently completed library project in the courtyard, and the Modoc Las Positas bike path that's been completed. Last fiscal year, Creeks Division staff performed 1,487 different plan reviews for compliance with post-construction. So next, I just wanted to give some example of how applicants are complying with post-construction requirements. We'll run through a few of these. First is permeable pavement. And we see quite a bit of this proposed. And there's a couple different types that we see. On the left here, we have a more traditional type of permeable pavement where the aggregate, there's joints between the pavers filled with aggregate. And so the stormwater percolates down in between the pavers. And then there's a basin below that filled with gravel that's about 3 to 12 inches deep on average. And then the water pools up and then slowly percolates into the ground. So something a little different that's still a permeable paver is what we call a hydroflow paver. And you can see that these don't have the aggregate filled gaps. So instead what happens is the stormwater percolates through the paver itself and then down into the basin below. So a little bit different look. And applicants tend to like that if they're concerned about the gaps between the pavers. They don't like the look of it. Here's an example of permeable concrete. We don't see much of this proposed. A lot of people don't think it looks very good. You can see how different it looks. You've got the traditional concrete in the foreground of the photo, and then the permeable concrete in the background. And so it's a little bit of a rougher look. But the difference here is that there's just not as much fines. There's not as much sand in the mix. So there's more void space and allows the water to percolate down into the ground. Similarly with permeable asphalt, we don't see much of this, but it's a approvable method of compliance. And again, there's fewer fines in this mix. So there's more void space and the water can percolate down through the asphalt. Retention basins are another great method of compliance. We don't see a lot of this because, as you can see, it takes quite a bit of space. And most people, when they want to develop their parcel, they want to use that space for development and don't want to dedicate it to a pond or a retention basin. But occasionally we do see these in town, and they're cost effective. They work great. It's great for great habitat, and it's very cost effective. Bioretention planters are something we see with a very built out environment. Kind of the downside of this is you don't get a lot of capacity. It's sort of a, the roof runoff flows into the bioretention planter, and then there's ponding area, and then it percolates down through the media layers, the soil and the gravel, and then down into the ground. Underground storage chambers, we see a ton of these. This is one of the most common things we see. And it's because of how flexible these installations can be. So, what you're looking at here is Bonet Park. This was an installation that the city did a few years ago, and then they installed a field over the top of it. So these are basically buried hollow chambers, and with a pipe connected to it, so the water can flow in underground, and then they fill gravel all around it, and then you can cover it over with whatever service you like. So, we did grass at Bonet Park, but they're very popular with built-out parcels or where you want to build lot line to lot line. I've even seen these proposed under a building or under a parking garage. But yeah, I can go under a parking lot, in a parking garage. There is a concern with maintenance, out of sight, out of mind. So we do require that there is some method of accessing these chambers to vector out and suction out the sediment. Cisterns are another very popular method of compliance, especially on sites with soils that don't infiltrate very well, or on a steep hillside, or just where the property owner wants to utilize the water. Instead of infiltrating it, deep underground, they want to, spread it around their lawn or irrigate their plants with it. The next component we'll talk about is water quality monitoring. We have a dedicated water quality monitoring coordinator, or we will, I should say. We're interviewing for that position tomorrow. This is Jill Murray's former position, but we'll be rehiring for this. And each year, the water quality monitoring coordinator prepares a research and monitoring plan, which includes such things as dry weather sampling of outfalls. So all the pipes into the creek should not be flowing during dry weather, unless there's some type of groundwater intrusion, something like that. But we want to make sure that there's no illicit discharges happening. So it's a great time to sample when it's 72 hours after it rains at least. We can take a look at these outfalls, and if we find anything flowing, we can try to figure out where it's coming from. We're also looking at monitoring of impaired water bodies for bacteria and toxicity. So most of the creeks in town are considered impaired by the water board, and the hope is that with repeated testing for bacteria and toxicity, we can eventually demonstrate that they should not be listed as impaired water bodies anymore. Each year, we're also focused on pollutant load modeling to determine the reduction that our program has achieved so far. That's looking at some of the stormwater improvements that we just talked about to see, once more of those are installed on site, then the idea is that we'll have less pollutants coming off of those sites, and then over time, as more parcels get redeveloped, there'll be less pollutants flowing off of those sites. Here's just a few photos of staff out in the rain doing water sampling. The last component of our program that we'll talk about is trash capture. It's a relatively new permit component. It actually hasn't officially been in our permit yet. We're waiting on a new permit to be issued. I'll talk more about that in a second. But we're required to fully implement these requirements by 2030. And what this is going to entail is in certain priority areas like bus stops, commercial areas, industrial areas, mixed use, and high density residential land use areas, we'll have to figure out a way to prevent trash 5 millimeters and greater from entering into our storm drain system and migrating downstream. And so that 5 millimeter diameter the 5 millimeter is about the diameter of a cigarette butt. That's kind of what they're targeting. Anything larger than the cigarette butt, they want to keep out of the storm drain. So we currently have storm drain screens on most of our storm drains in town. However, those were installed, 15 years ago or so before this requirement, and those were not installed and designed for a 5 millimeter, or for a cigarette butt for a diameter. So those will not help us comply. So what are we going to do instead? Well, we have a few options. The first two photos on the left and the middle are structural measures that we could take and install on sites that would cost the city a lot of money. It's a CDS unit on the left and then a connector pipe screen in the middle. It's a continuous deflective separation unit on the left. And so these are really expensive. They're expensive to maintain, and we would need a lot of them citywide, to comply. So that's one method of compliance. But what we're hoping to do instead is to demonstrate that through street sweeping and through repeated trash cleanups with staff and contractors, we can demonstrate that in the areas that have a lot of trash, we can reduce that amount of trash to a negligible level, so we don't need to install these stormwater controls. So that's our hope, and we're still working on that. Once we have a proposal, we'll go to the water board and try to convince them that our plan is okay instead of installing these structural measures. So I mentioned our annual report. Each year we do submit one of these to the state through their website. And Creeks Division is responsible for compiling all the summaries that we receive from city to staff. I mentioned about over 200 measurable goals that we report on. And each year in October, we submit that report. Last October, we submitted our report. This October, we'll be submitting another report. It's due on October 15th. We're currently in year 12 of the permit that was issued in 2013. It seems like every year when I come and give this presentation, I say we're going to get a new permit any day now, or this year. Well, we're in year 12 of what was supposed to be a 5-year permit, so we're still waiting. But we have received an initial draft of that new permit. We received that last September. And so it was an informal draft. The next draft, the formal draft, is scheduled for this spring or summer, so we'll see if that happens. But the latest estimate is for adoption of this new permit in late this year, so late 2025. And if that happens, then beginning of our next fiscal year, so fiscal year 2027, would be when the permit takes effect, so July 1st, 2026. That's the end of my presentation, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Madam Chair?
Yes, thank you, Jim. I was writing notes on the timeline, thinking about how long, how many, year after year, you've shared updates with us that still waiting. It's not the regional board, it's the state water board, right?
Correct, yeah, it's the state board, but we'll deal with the regional board. That's who our contact is with.
Gotcha. Thanks for that, and thanks for that very informative presentation. And I was really impressed. I love getting the word out about all these different ways to capture stormwater and keep it on site and help reduce pollution. I think as a community, we can continue to do so much more. So it's great to get information about that out. And then I was just really want to commend you, the whole Creeks division, on, the 24-hour response to all 105 illicit discharges, the review of almost 1,500 plans that's post-construction. You guys are keeping busy and doing a lot of great work, so thank you. And then I want to see if my fellow committee members have questions or comments. Lee.
Madam Chair, thank you. Thank you again so much, not only for the presentation, but for the work that it represents, which is extraordinary. This is a pretty nuts and bolts question. I live around the corner from a covered storm drain and find myself manually having to remove leaf litter that's blocking it, and this is despite periodic street sweeping. How do you handle that? Because I'm sure there are many of these throughout the city, and I don't know if the new storm drains covers that you're imagining installing would address that better?
Yeah, probably not. But we can clean that out. Like, if you're finding one that's clogged, just let us know, and we can get that taken care of. Either a streets division or we have a contractor as well that can get that cleaned out.
I just use my hand and remove it and put it on the sidewalk.
I don't know if you use the SB Connect app that the city has, but that's one of the things you can report on there. And our streets crews can come out and clean it. But to follow up on that, like, we are looking at our street sweeping program and, ways to make it more effective and where we might reduce or increase street sweeping and whatnot. So, that's another thing you can submit to us through SB Connect, or just reach out to us directly if you're seeing, I don't know what your neighborhood specific schedule is for street sweeping, but if it seems insufficient or whatnot. But in general, I would say the goal of that is really to remove trash and sediment, and some leaves making their way into our creek is probably not the worst thing.
Well, and also diverting water flow, because what's happening is as the cover gets obstructed by organic matter, the water just goes around and runs further down the street, straight down the hill towards the ocean. So the goal is for the water to be heading not there.
Yeah, and I don't know the specifics of your case, but those screens are designed to be retractable, so when they get enough pressure up against them, so if there's enough debris kind of clogging it and water's kind of pushing against it, they trigger open.
Okay.
So that's like a flood mitigation measure. But yeah, so again, if you maybe have a storm drain screen that doesn't appear to be opening like it's supposed to, when I'm not sure how much debris we're talking about and like exactly how much force is up against it, but that's another item that can be entered into SB Connect.
Thank you. Good to know.
Yes.
And I, kind of related to that, I had written down, can you put sort of a mesh attachment to the trash collector as sort of a less expensive option?
Yeah, that could be a solution to to retrofit those screens so it kind of prevents the 5 millimeter size from entering. Okay. Yeah.
I wasn't sure if that would, then I was listening to Lee, wondering if that would cause more problems.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we want to look at to see if
Okay.
the flow could still enter. Wouldn't want to reduce the flow and cause potential flooding for that, but it's
And
an
then option. I had a question on the underground storage chambers that have plastic. Is there any concern about the plastic degrading over time and that having plastic micropollution?
Yeah, that's not ideal. Yeah, it's definitely not ideal. But they do make concrete underground storage, but it's an added cost, right? So there's concrete. I'm sure there's some stainless steel ones too. I'm not sure if I've seen those, but somebody's probably making them. But I was at a conference that I saw these big concrete chambers. But it's a cost. It's a cheap way to create that void space underground.
Maybe they
And-
could be out of permeable concrete. Slowly release it.
Yeah.
And then the last question that I had to do with construction runoff control. I know that there are areas like places like Germany that their storm and surface water fees are charged by how much water you're actually emitting from your property. And so there's certain construction techniques to try and keep that soil spongy and absorbent, I'm wondering if any attention is paid to how much water comes off, because, once it goes into the roadway, then it sort of does its thing, picks up pollutants and erodes.
Yeah, I mean, there's only so much they can do on a construction site that the inspectors hold them to. So, in my experience, the inspector goes out, and if what's installed in the erosion sediment control plan is installed properly and correctly, then they're going to be in good standing. It's typically when it's not installed properly that the inspector takes action, but there is no flow monitoring of what's coming off site.
And is this something that there could be a discussion between your department and the building department to put into place part of the landscape aspect of developing a property to where by design and by process, they're actually, trying to keep water on site?
Yeah, I mean, the landscape probably on most construction projects wouldn't be installed until the very end. So the erosion and sediment control measures are during construction. So it's when the site is under construction. So it'd probably be before the landscape's installed. It's usually one of the last things that happens during a construction project.
Yeah, I know places I've worked where which have a little more clay in the soil, where there's rules about taking the topsoil off and then making sure after everything's scraped that the clays aren't creating this impermeable barrier. Everything has to drain, and then putting that back on site. And it's just part of city rules in other places. So just something maybe to consider for future development. I think, a lot of issue with stormwater is trying to keep stormwater from occurring in the first place. And so we can't do that for past development, but we can certainly make an effort for future development.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks, Stephanie. Great question.
Just a quick question. Is there some penalty for illicit discharge?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the way it works is code enforcement officer will go to the site
Yeah.
and they'll check out the report.
Yeah.
And if they find there is an illicit discharge, they'll try to work to stop it. That's the first goal.
Yeah, for sure.
Stop it immediately. And then education, right? So you're saying this is what went wrong. This isn't allowed in the city. It's basically don't do it again. Try not to do it again, please. And we'll follow up with a letter.
I see.
So we'll take photos of the discharge. We'll send it to the tenant and the property owner, or the contractor that's committing the violation. And then we keep a record of it. And then if we get another report within the same year, within 12 months, then we can issue an automatic fine.
I see. And 99,000 pounds of garbage, way to go. That's amazing. Do you overlap with or work with channel keepers in that regard as well, or?
We do get reports from them occasionally. I've received many reports from someone on this committee. But yeah, absolutely. When we're open to taking reports from anyone. We have a hotline, and then Aaron mentioned SB Connect earlier. That's probably the preferred way right now to reach us. We're monitoring that all the time.
I want to add something real quick on the reporting illicit discharges was just a big thank you to Creeks and also, I believe, the City Parks Department. There was a large piece of debris near Ledbetter Beach that had actually been reported last year to us, and I believe, and then we reported it to the city, and the city was already well aware of it. And it looked like it, I think Jill determined it was old erosion control. It was like a mixture of concrete rebar and what looked like foam packing peanuts. And it was eroding, and it looked like it had been maybe fallen down the cliffside in some erosion event when some of the big storms last winter. And it was just really tricky to get to due to the rocky nature of the beach when, you know, our winter storms remove all the sand. And we had a trusty cleanup volunteer reach out again with more photos and reach back out to the City Creeks Division, and they connected with Parks again. And at first they weren't sure they were going to be able to do it, but they were able to get out and successfully remove it. And I can't even imagine how that got into a vehicle to get off the beach. But I just want to really extend our thanks and gratitude for that.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, Chair Penny Owens, that was Steve Biddle in the Parks Department who made that happen. So shout out to Steve.
Thanks, Steve. Any other questions and comments? All right.
I just wanted to express thank you. I think I was one of the 105 who reported an illicit discharge. I was walking in my neighborhood, which is quite hilly, and there was some construction going on that was clearly not having any water control onto the property. And you guys, well, whomever, the enforcement officer was very responsive, and I got feedback. I did it through SB Connect, and I got feedback that they didn't notice a violation, so thank you.
Well, thanks for reporting. I mean, we rely on all the eyes and ears around, so yeah, we encourage everyone who sees something, just report it.
And a committee member, Ann?
Thank you for the presentation and for all the work the city is doing on this. The question that I had is related to the permeable pavers, specifically the type that have gaps in between them. I've noticed, I know, for example, at Oak Park, that sometimes those gaps collect debris, including microtrash and also organic debris that might start like clogging the effectiveness of them to infiltrate water. What is being done about that for ones that are already installed or like in consideration for new development that includes those?
Yeah, absolutely. Maintenance of all of the, compliance measures that we talked about is a huge, huge thing. It's really important, and everything needs maintenance. There's no solution that doesn't require maintenance. So specifically for permeable pavement, they're going to clog over time, and especially with the more impervious area that's flowing onto them, they're going to clog faster. So if you've been to McKenzie Park, that's another project that we did with permeable pavers, and there's asphalt that flows onto those permeable pavers, and those clog really fast. The ones at Oak Park have been pretty slow to clog, but absolutely we have to maintain them. And so when we need to, what we'll do is we'll have like a vacuum that will come along, and it will suction everything out. So it'll take the debris that you see accumulated there and also the aggregate. So it takes all of it out. And so then you'll have to sweep back in that aggregate and to replace that. So fortunately, it takes a long time for them to completely clog. They'll still be really permeable for a long time, unless you have the situation like I described where you have impervious area, that flows onto the pavers. Then they'll clog real quick.
Any other questions or comments? All right, well, thanks again, Jim, for all your work and for sharing that update with us. All right, that item was just for discussion, so we'll move on
Do
to.
you want to, sorry, Chair Penny Owens,
Oh, wait, this
can
is
you
the one
open
I
up public
always forget.
comment?
Is there any public comment? I'm sorry, I'm new to being chair this year.
I do have someone online, so if you would like to provide comment on the Stormwater Management Program report, please go ahead and raise your hand. Seeing no hands raised, I think we're okay.
Thank you, Stephanie, and I apologize to anyone who did want to comment or I won't forget next one. And our second business item of the evening is a sustainable stormwater rebate program update from Creeks manager Erin Markey. Thanks, Erin. All
Great, thanks, Chair Owens. This is a great follow-up to Jim's presentation. I think when we did our outreach and education workshop in November, we told you this was coming, as well as some stormwater guidance documents, which are hot off the presses. Jen just dropped those off in the middle of the meeting, so I'll pass those down if anyone's interested. There's a Tier 2 stormwater guidance, which is basically like, how do I comply with Tier 2 post-construction stormwater requirements? We'll be making those for each stormwater tier. And then what we're calling our lookbook, which is just a bunch of pretty pictures and short description of all the different stormwater BMP options that Jim kind of just went through some of them with you, but to try and really demystify our stormwater post-construction requirements and make it simpler for people to comply. So in that vein, another new program is our stormwater rebate program. We're really trying to incentivize voluntary stormwater measures being installed in our community to further increase our stormwater improvements. So real quickly, I know this is probably not new information to you, but anyone watching at home or anyone here, what's the problem with stormwater runoff? Why are we doing all this work, and why should we care? As we've talked about, as that water is running off your driveway and into the street, it's picking up pollutants. That water runs untreated to our storm drain system and out to our creeks and our ocean. And so it really can reduce water quality and lead to some of the impairments that we're seeing in our creeks. It also modifies what we call the hydrograph, or like how our streams react to storm events. So basically that water runs off those hard surfaces, concrete roof area, anything that's not going to take that water in like natural soil will. And you get these really huge spikes in storm flows. So increased in rate and volume, and that can lead to issues in our creeks. That can lead to erosion. That can lead to channel downcutting, which is, historically happened in our creeks and continuing. So instability in our creek systems themselves, but that can also lead to increased flooding in our communities as that runoff is, much rapider rate of flows. And so really trying to look at stormwater as a resource, and how do we manage stormwater as a resource instead? That's through, in our built environment, allowing things to infiltrate into the ground, so providing more permeable surfaces, all the things Jim just talked about, permeable hardscape, landscaping, green roofs, things like that, that allow that water to soak into the site, be retained, and slow that runoff curve and kind of more mimic the natural environment that was there pre-development. And, improve all those things we just talked about, reduce flooding, reduce the erosional fossils we're seeing in our creeks, and then also as that water soaks in through the soil, you get water treatment before that water eventually, soaks into the groundwater and into the base flows of our creeks. You can also get increased base flow in our creeks as another benefit. So we've launched our stormwater rebate program just last week. And so what we're looking at is some voluntary measures that property owners can install on their own properties to provide stormwater benefits. And so we've narrowed it down to these initial offerings at this point. This kind of a pilot, we're kind of launching it, see how much interest there is, see how we might tweak it over time. But disconnected downspouts essentially means if you have a downspout that's currently piped all the way to your curb and gutter, that would be a piped downspout. If you disconnect that and let your roof downspout actually run to landscaping, you'd be eligible for this $250 rebate per project. There's also a rain barrel rebate. So rain barrels essentially usually are installed at a downspout. They can range in size. We're kind of limiting ours between 50 and 200 gallons. Anything over that, really more of a cistern, might require some structural stability analysis because of weight. But you can get up to $200 per barrel, and this is on a reimbursable basis. I'm going to actually click through ahead. So there's some information in this table, and this is kind of what's on our website, but I've got pictures of each of these as well. So here's some examples of disconnected downspouts. You can do rain chains. You can do just, cut off the downspout, let it let it run off into the landscaping right at the edge of the structure. Some people pipe it a few feet away from the structure, maybe put some cobble or rocks down to kind of dissipate the flow. But there's a lot of different options of what that might look like. And then rain barrels, again, so much variability in these. We looked at possibly just like bulk purchasing rain barrels and giving them out for free. Ultimately, we decided to go the route of letting people choose what worked for their site. Just there's so much aesthetic variability, let alone shape and sizes. Like you can get rectangular ones that fit nicely kind of up under your eaves. So we opted to go this route for now to kind of give that flexibility of what works best for someone's site. But I know years ago there was a program to use recycled wine barrels. Such a great program. And we've been talking about, could we get that back going? Someone actually asked me about it today. If anyone was still making those, I'm not sure, but we're going to do a little research on that. But these can be, recycled materials out of a wine barrel. They can be, plastic purchased from Home Depot. There's these corrugated metal. There's such a variety of options. But the intent here is you're capturing that runoff from your roof and you're storing it. So you're attenuating that water, slowing down. You're going to use that water on your landscaping, ideally, through a hose bib down at the bottom. And so that's delaying that water running off your property, and hopefully it's not running off your property. Hopefully it's going to be used on your property, but it's delaying or eliminating that water from running out into the street when it rains. And so that one is on a reimbursable basis. So the applicant would have to provide a receipt for that one. And then rain gardens. So these are shallow depressions in the landscape that allow water to kind of pool up and sit and infiltrate into the ground. We are giving a rebate of $3 per square foot of rain garden installed. So that's the actual depression. These could be like little river type things through the landscape. They could be larger bioretentions areas, so like a big pond. Minimum of 4 inches deep to qualify, up to 18 inches. And additionally, we're working with water conservation to both cross promote kind of. These are stackable rebates. So if you have an existing lawn that you're removing and you want to turn it into a rain garden, then you'd be eligible for an additional 2 square feet, so up to $5 per square foot if that case applied to you. And really any of these rebates, if you were looking at them, could be stacked. So you could do a disconnected downspout that goes to a rain barrel, and then the overflow from the rain barrel goes to a rain garden, and you could stack all of them. And then the last one is removed hardscape. So this one has a number of caveats. We're looking at a minimum of 20 square feet to be eligible. It has to not be a driveway. So a caveat of the program overall, I think that was on that first slide, is that it not trigger a building permit. And that's just to not get into kind of confusion of what is a required stormwater project versus a voluntary one. So only measures that don't trigger a permit are eligible. So any work on a driveway requires a building permit. So unfortunately, that's not going to be eligible for this rebate program at this time. But if you want to remove walkways or patios on a single family residence, completely eligible. They could be replaced with landscaping. They could be replaced with permeable alternatives. And so that is a $2 per square foot of hardscape removed. And so the process is there's an intake eligibility form on our website. That's kind of the initial starting point. If you're interested, you fill that out. Then we set up a site visit to confirm the feasibility and if you're eligible for what's proposed. Essentially, are your downspouts already disconnected? Then sorry, you're not eligible. Is there hardscape you're actually going to remove? We'll measure it, we'll kind of quantify it. And so then there's a little agreement form that we both sign at that site visit that basically outlines what's proposed, and the applicant or property owner agrees to some terms and conditions as part of that. And then once they've completed it, which we've just launched this, so we've had a number of applicants and site visits already, but no one's completed it yet. They'll submit for reimbursement with some additional photos of the completed work, and a final site inspection might be required in some situations. So we're currently, just launched it last week. We're outreaching about it in all the different city newsletters. So Water Resources shared something about it. We shared it in our department newsletter. It was in the City News and Brief on Monday. I think we'll do another piece on it next week. Social media, we're going to do a city TV segment about it. And then outreach events. So like at Earth Day, we'll have lots of information about it and try to promote the program there. And so far, yeah, we've had 11 applicants and we've done like 5 site visits already. So we'll see if it just keeps getting interest or if that's kind of the initial push. We're still feeling it out. So we hope that the interest continues. And that's it, if anybody has questions.
Thanks so much, Erin. Really exciting. I'll hold my questions and comments till later, but Lee.
Well, I can vouch for the fact that Erin is doing site visits because I was walking by a house the other day in my neighborhood, because all I do is walk dogs all day, and there she was with one of my neighbors doing, I think it was the first, you said it was the first one, yeah, so pretty cool. Some feedback for you. In my other life, I'm the captain of a newly emerging Firewise community. And one of the things that the state is going to increasingly be pushing is a zone 0, where there's really nothing flammable within 5 feet of a structure. So those beautiful wine barrel rainwater catchment things, no, because they're wood. So I would encourage you to discourage people from either landscaping or things like rainwater catchment that are made of any kind of flammable materials. The state is going to be increasingly enforcing this, certainly for new construction, and insurance companies are increasingly pushing people to remove any landscaping from within 5 feet of their house as well. But there's lots of other options.
Yes, thank you, Committee Member Heller. That's a great point and well taken. My understanding on the Zone 0 is that will be in any mandatory fire zone, but not citywide. But we should follow up on that. But it's still a well taken comment. We live in a very fire prone community, and no matter what, we should be considering.
It may
such
not be
things.
mandated outside of high fire hazard areas, but increasingly parts of the city are being rezoned.
Yep.
So Ealing's Park was rezoned high fire hazard in 2021, which is why we're now forming a Firewise community, because Pat, whose house you did the other day, literally backs onto Ealing's. And insurance companies are starting to cancel people's homeowner insurance throughout the city, not just where Councilmember Snedden lives, which is ground zero for fire. And so there is an increasing push that the Fire Safe Council, which is a countywide nonprofit, is making to educate people about not using anything flammable within 5 feet of their homes. That includes things like wooden fences, wooden gates, for example. So if we don't want people to make an investment in either landscaping or rainwater catchment that turns out to be flammable, if they can go straight for the better option. But for something like, I've got gravel now adjacent to my house, that's easily infiltrated, right? So the water that is coming down is just permeating through the gravel, which is large and loose, into the soil there. There aren't any plants, unfortunately, to catch it, but that's functioning. And there are metal barrels like what you showed, smaller cisterns. I'd be cautious about plastic because it can melt. Unfortunately, with metal, you do get radiant heat. I'm learning a lot about fire in my other life. But anyway, I would be maybe exploring that somewhat, maybe working with the Fire Safe Council on this, so that the advice that people are being given is both fire safe and advances the goals of this program.
Thanks for that, Lee. Ann?
Thank you for that comment about fire safe landscaping, because I've worked on projects related to fire safe landscaping as well, and I would agree that is something that should be looked at. And I think off the top of my head, maybe people could channel the water somehow from through that 5 foot zone to a place that's vegetated outside the 5 foot zone. And my other question also related to vegetation and any of these projects that people are getting rebates for that involve planting vegetation. Are there any restrictions on what that vegetation is? Because I know there's certain invasive plants that might have started as ornamental things that people put in their landscape and can then end up in the creek. So what is being done to avoid that?
Yes, thank you, Committee Member Burdett. That is a great question. So under our current stormwater rebate program, it's required that they use water-wise plants to comply with the city's landscape design standards. Same, obviously, with water conservation's landscape rebates. In that, we have a great resource of Santa Barbara native plants that the Botanic Garden put together in partnership with WaterWise a number of years ago, and so that's a resource we're sharing with people. But it is not a requirement that it be native plants. We considered, they do have to be WaterWise though, and non-invasive. We did consider adding additional rebate for native plants, but we just felt like that was kind of beyond the scope of creeks, even though it's, native habitat and related. So for now, it's not part of the program.
Yeah, thanks, Anne. Great question. Stephanie?
I think this is such a great program. I'm excited. I'm thinking about all of our downspouts. One of which, we live on a hill and our driveway is very steep. And we did disconnect that downspout. And then the vegetation adjacent to the driveway, we put a very long, like very long pipe and drilled perforations in it. And so it slowly, hopefully, never reaches the street. Hopefully it's taken, that's our hope anyway. But
Yeah, I've seen just on the few site visits I've been on, and in my own neighborhood, a lot of people put up temporary measures during the rainy season to kind of divert their downspouts into landscaping, and it's great to see, and that's definitely what we would want to encourage here as part of this program.
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie. There's what's the saying? It's like slow sink spread when you're looking at how to deal with water on your property, and so.
yeah, I think I've heard capture, storage, and safe release of water.
Same.
Yeah, same thing, yeah.
Any other questions or comments from our fellow committee members? No, and I just want to echo Stephanie's. I'm in my day job, I work with an environmental organization, and we're really excited to see all these different options available to the community, and we will be happy to spread the word as much as we can and help get the word out about it, help educate folks about all these opportunities they have to capture stormwater and keep it on site as long as possible. So thanks for that. And I hope the community out there watching will participate. Oh, yes.
I'm sorry, that triggered something. And actually Stephanie's comment as well. And I'm a homeowner, and I did see the information before it was presented tonight, just through the regular communication from the city. And what might help me as a homeowner and other homeowners is, if possible, the city could offer a service where we could call and have someone, like you do with measuring water amounts from your irrigation, just come on the property and say, well, you could do X, Y, and Z. Because I don't know what would be the best approach, or multiple approaches, but the way it sounds is if I already have an idea, then I ask for an appointment. So just a thought.
Oh, that's a great suggestion. And I was going to mention I think it's a collaborative of city and county, the Green Gardener program, sharing. Okay, you guys are already on it.
No, these are all really great questions and comments. I will share a couple things that came to mind. So it's not just available to property owners. It is available to renters if they can prove that they have agreement with the owner, just to get that information out there. So if anybody's listening. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. The Green Gardeners program, yes, Water Conservation already does with them a little presentation and talks to all the rebate programs. So they're going to include this as part of that. And then the initial intake eligibility form is basically just like, are you interested? Contact us and we'll set up a site visit. So it is basically what you're describing. You can check a box on what you think you're interested in of the different measures, and do you have a lawn? Because if you have a lawn you're going to remove, then we want to include water conservation in the site visit. But basically at that site visit we will look, are your downspouts already disconnected or are they not? And do you not even have downspouts? Because I already went to one house that they have no rain gutters. So having a rain barrel, which is what they wanted, will be more challenging without that. So yes, absolutely, that's kind of the intention of the site visit.
Aaron? When you say disconnected, I'm trying to visualize what connected downspouts that are going
Into a street.
into it. Is it, I mean, is it literally you've got a pipe running all the way down to the street?
Underground usually. Oh. So you watch some downspouts just go right into the ground, and then when you walk by, you'll see the gutter has a hole or the pipe.
Yeah, so, I mean, in the picture here on the top right, let's see if my cursor works. Oops. Oh my gosh. I have to put the thing again. Anyways, as Penny was trying to describe, if your downspout basically goes into the ground and out of view, and underground there's a pipe that runs all the way to your gutter, and then there's a little perforation in your gutter, a little, boring through the curb face.
In like a discharge pipe where you would see water. Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
So that's what we'd be checking for. I went to one house today where it was like, oh, it looks like your downspouts are piped. And then we went to the curb, there's no connection. So theirs are piped to some sort of French drain or something under the ground. And so not eligible, but.
But also not a problem, because if they're being
Infiltrating
dispersed,
into
if
the
it's a
ground.
French drain.
Yep.
Okay, because I'm just thinking about, I have a couple that drip into these grates, right? But I don't think I have a discharge pipe, so presumably, so this is where we need to educate the community, because we don't know
Absolutely.
what that means. Right,
Absolutely,
okay,
yeah. It's
Thank you.
bad verbiage. What we want people to do is connect their roof downspouts to landscaping, essentially.
Any other questions or comments? That was a great discussion and really great presentation on the program. Thank you, Erin. Are there any members of the public that would like to ask questions or provide any comments? Got it. Stephanie?
We do have an online attendee, so if you would like to provide public comment on the Sustainable Stormwater Rebate Program item, please go ahead and raise your hand. Seeing no hands raised.
All right, well, thanks. And I believe that brings us to our next item on the agenda, which is the adjournment of the meeting. Yes. To call this meeting to a close. Thanks, everyone, and thanks, Erin and Stephanie.
Thank you.